All right, guys ready to go? So the good news is this is not a labs, so there's no dependency on machines or virtualization or anything. This is a static offline PowerPoint, so I'm going to take a chance. Nothing can go wrong, so we got that going for us. So thanks for joining us. 4 o'clock on Thursday. Appreciate you putting in the time for us. I'm Ben, this is Brett. We'll do a quick intro in a minute. What we really want to do is talk a little about how we run tech support at Tableau, but really we're trying to generalize the content for anything operational, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But we love operations. We're operators, and we see rows like this. You could think, well, this is just a bunch of transactions, a bunch of tickets, a bunch of fields that associate tickets. But when we see this, we see its potential for the data to sing with the power of Tableau. So, quick agenda. So we'll do a quick intro. And then we'll spend a little bit of time talk about self-serve analytics at scale. So I think one of the things that we do at Tableau in our tech support org is really deploy some pretty good work of being self-service and giving analytics to our entire team at scale. Then we'll do a bunch of stuff around how we use Tableau to run operations. And so we have a couple of vizzes we'll share you, and Brett will give you some good tips and insights throughout. So hopefully that'll be beneficial for everybody. So I'm the guy on the left. My name is Ben Sates. I lead tech support at Tableau. I do love data, but my desktop skills are not good. You will not see me at Tableau Doctor this week.
And I'm Brett Magard. I'm an analytics program manager that helps out Ben's team. And I love data as well. I love it even more when it's clean. I live in Tableau Desktop, and you may have seen me this week at Tableau Doctor.
And just to prove it, by the way, this is the best viz I've ever made, which really looks like a dog's breakfast. It's just a bunch. I have a Peloton bike at home, and I wanted to visualize my rides, and this is the best I could do. This adheres to 0 best practices, but I had fun making it. All right, so first, let's talk about operations, which is really the core of what we want to talk about today. So for us, we're tech support, and I'll talk a little bit more about the org in a minute. But really, we're trying to generalize a lot of what we're doing to think about any team that provides operational support. So if you're IT operations or facilities operations or HR operations, it's providing service through some sort of transaction. So if you use any one of the systems here, there should be something beneficial that hopefully we can give you to take away from. Anything I didn't cover? All right, so far so good. Our team, we have about a 400-person global team supporting our customers at Tableau. While everybody has full access to Tableau, not everyone is as good at desktop as Brett. So we got to think about how do we help everybody use Tableau, but doesn't have to be certified in desktop. We do over 100,000 transactions a year. We have to support a bunch of products and service levels, so we got to think about how do we make sure that's all doable and flexible. And then obviously lots of roles. We've got individuals, we've got teams and squads, and managers and leaders across the org. So when we think about our team and self-service analytics, we have to meet all of these varying needs without having to have a viz for every one of these groups and subgroups. Like many operational teams, the things we focus from a KPI perspective are customer satisfaction, response time, and resolution time. And we'll show you some vizzes and how we do that and some of the things we think are pretty neat. So why do all this at scale? And so, as I just alluded to, we've got a lot of people in different regions, different roles, working on different products, different service levels. So we've got to be able to provide dashboards that allow everybody to find something they're looking for that's relevant for them. And that's the at-scale piece. You can say, okay, why self-service? Well, quick trivia question. Does anybody know what these two states have in common? So it's Oregon and New Jersey. These are the last 2 states in America that you can get full-service gas because the world has moved to a self-service model. I want to go pump my gas and get on with my day, not sit there and wait for some attendant to come help me out. Another model where self-service really has won out is think about banking. Who wants to go wait in line at a teller to get some cash? So ATM certainly made that the way to do it. And then now with phones and apps, we don't even have to go to the bank or do anything anymore. Now it's even more cashless. So the idea about putting the power in people's hands empowers them to do more and have more time to do things they want to do. Okay, so how do we do this on Tableau? So the reason this is so important to do at scale is we want to really minimize the dependency on analysts. Everybody here probably has a team of analysts, and sorry, Brett, we love you and all, but the idea is not to have my 400-person team running all their ideas and needs through poor Brett here. And then how do we really help remove the barriers so everybody has the ability to find their own data and ask their own questions and have their own hypothesis? They can go look up data and try and figure out if they've got an idea or not. And then really innovation. And so by giving people access to the data themselves, they can then innovate and do all kinds of cool stuff. And we'll give you some examples out later where by empowering our teams, we've seen some really cool innovations in terms of how we measure our operations. So what I'll show you next is actually the dashboard we use to run our entire 400-person support organization. This is the self-service hub that many, many people use every single day, multiple times a day. And when I first got to Tableau and saw this, I said, okay, this is pretty crude. It's a bunch of bars. It's a bar chart with about 47 drop-downs on the right-hand side. Like, how is this the best that Tableau can do in terms of our key metrics workbook? Like, yeah, that's a lot to digest. And in the top is all the different sheets. So you got all these sheets, all these drop-downs, and that's it. Like, Tableau is this one bar chart. Okay, great. But as you'll see, I'll let Brett walk you through it, actually is a lot more complexity to it that empowers a lot.
Yeah, so you might have actually heard at Keynote yesterday that metrics is kind of a new feature coming out in Tableau. It's really important to keep line of sight on your major metrics in a basic over time series analysis. And so what we do with key metrics, the interactivity on the right is meant to sort of mimic Tableau Desktop. So in the green, I'm highlighting the parameters we use. Those are mainly just swapping fields. It's akin to dragging a field from the data pane into the view. And that enables people to switch the view, and you'll see what that looks like in a second. And then the filters on the right, those are enabling people to ask second, third, fourth layer questions when they're interrogating a hypothesis. And so
if you look at this slide, you say, okay, well, I have some green bars, those are good, but I've got gray bars, that's not good, and they're missing goal, so why? And so this one viz allows us to dissect even within the viz. I don't have to ask anybody questions, I don't have to make any queries or do any dragging. All I got to do is start to do a slice or a split by different things. So in this case, we've chosen priority. And if you take that previous chart and break it out by priority, all of a sudden you can see, by the way, this is all fictitious data. We generally do green all the time, everywhere. On the top, it's green, so the priority 1 tickets are actually good. Priority 2 is where we've got some gray. So with one click, I've taken a bunch of data and quickly split it out and found something to go dig in on further. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, so this is a simplistic viz. It's not that hard to make, but what it's going to do is enable people that don't necessarily know how to use Tableau Desktop or don't even have a license to Tableau Desktop to get some of that data discovery benefit that you get by playing in Tableau Desktop and following your own line of interrogation.
So that's a little bit on how we use a viz to create interactivity and self-service amongst teams. But there's this whole other constituency of creators, people who actually are going to use Tableau Desktop and do powerful things. So we'll talk a little bit how we do that in a self-serve way at Tableau. It all starts with this idea about truth. So we've got to have data and fields that we all agree are, this is the truth. This is the source of data that we will use to run our business, and we'll agree on that. And then in our world, one of the challenges is we have a lot of fields that you could use. And so the question is, well, how do I help creators create, but not have them use the wrong fields? And maybe there's all kinds of data sources that are old or not as active. And so how do we do this in a way where we can have the right amount of confidence that people will find the right fields and use the right fields?
Yeah, and so this is a screenshot of an actual search that we just did last week on the literal name of the main data source that we use. And as you can see, there is about 12 results here. And if I didn't know exactly which one was right, how could I know that I'm looking at the right data? So that's just to give you an idea of like what you're up against when you start enabling tons of people to create. You'll start to see versions of your truth come out, sometimes with the same name, and it can get really hard to keep track of what's real.
And it's counterproductive when two people come with data and they use two different data sources. Then all of a sudden it's an argument about, well, where did you get the data from? From here. Oh, well, you should have gotten it from there. I don't believe that data is right or something. So getting everybody to use the proper data source ensures you can then have a productive discussion versus waste time arguing about where did you get the data from.
And so there's two main components here that we focus on to enable our power users, that's what we'll call them. One is that you want to make sure that you're directing their self-service energy at making new vizzes and spending it on new ideas, not on finding out how to connect to data or shaping data or writing new calculations that have already been written. And then secondly, you need to give them a safe space to share that's separate from where you keep your truth. So the first main thing to do that, and many of you may do this already, and if you do, great, but it's really important, especially as you scale up to 400 plus Tableau users like we have. And so this is just a screenshot of one of the data sources that we manage, and I just put a couple of recommendations here. So you want to, when you do find those important calculated fields, I've highlighted the reopen rate here, just publish it up. No one will have to create it no one will have to create it again if you do it once, and then you all know that you're looking at the same thing. And then the field descriptions, those let people know exactly what's going on underneath. You can tell them how you calculated it. You can tell them where it might be useful. They're really helpful. All you have to do is hover over the field. And then just make sure that you actually use user-friendly field names, because you can do all this, and if you're not actually naming it in a way that someone can find it when searching for fields in Tableau Desktop, they're probably going to create their own anyways. And then you also want to make sure that you certify. So this is the same screenshot we saw before, and I've cheated and highlighted the actual version of our main data source. And then after you certify it, what's going to happen is that Tableau will actually sort all of your certified data sources to the top of all search results. So not just in this pane, but even in that little search window at the top right of Tableau server, you'll see that those certified data sources are going to get floated up. So it's really, really easy way for, and even in Tableau Desktop when you're connecting to a data source, it's a really easy way to make sure that people are accessing the version of truth and not going off and spending time recreating it. And then the second major thing that we do is use Tableau projects. It's pretty simple, but use them to enforce this governance. So we have a project for truth, limited set of publishers so that you can keep a really tight line of governance. You can make sure that everything in there is validated, governed, and goes through a certain content promotion process. It's a great way to keep those central published data sources and central vizzes, like the key metrics viz we just showed you before. And then when you start to scale out more power users or creators, that's where you need to have this sandbox. We call ours the technical support sandbox. There's no publish restrictions there. And every bit of governance or content promotion is optional. It's just a place for people to freely share ideas, download each other's stuff, riff on it, and publish something else. And then just to tell you how serious we are about that, we've begun doing this in our data layer. So we have a schema for truth, a central platform where things like Salesforce that multiple departments are using. They curate that stuff, and this is pretty standard. Most companies will have this, and it's protected from people like me going in and writing or deleting records. But we've recently set up a schema for play so that people like me can have a safe space to write data and make my own tables or write my own calculations instead of in a published data source in the actual source system, so that not even the most intrepid of your creators are going to get it wrong.
Yeah, and so we wanted to just highlight a couple of examples. This is one of a series we'll share where by giving the team access to trusted data sources, they were able to create vizzes that we now use in a standard way. And so this is one where in our key metrics that Brett and I talked about, we have data about backlog, but it really wasn't granular enough. And so one of the managers went out and created this, and there's an entire blowout of all the backlog data in ways that we could better use to run the operation. And this is so good, it's now become the global standard for how we measure and analyze backlog. We've added filters by region. And so, again, by just empowering creators and giving them a safe way to experiment and innovate, you get really cool results.
And then one of my favorite things to see is how all these different people in different job levels are creating operational tools. They'll kind of start to treat Tableau like a programming set and build things like this. This is just one of the ways that some of the people on our team manage their own personal queues, the tickets that are assigned to them and their team. It's in a Kanban style workflow, if you know what that is. And it just works really well. They're able to own that process, make their own changes to it, and really optimize their own workflow however they see fit. And then you can even build you can even build a queuing system in Tableau, and this is something that we used for a long time. We're not using it currently, but it was a really cool example of how you can iterate on your sorting algorithms and sort of test different weighting factors. So if you want a wait time to be less important than it is, or if you want a certain service level to shoot up the queue faster, you can really easily prototype that with Tableau, and you don't even need to be a programmer or anything. You can just do it on the spot. And then finally, you'll also see people, especially the people that are most affected by any metrics you set out, they'll start to build really mature looks into it. And this is an example of a basic throughput metric, a close metric, that and this viz is actually normalizing it's normalizing that throughput metric to account for difficulty, and it's managed by the managers and the technicians. So it's just some cool examples of things that have come from the team that probably wouldn't come from a central analytics group. I don't know that you'd get these prioritized, but they're really useful and they help people do their jobs better.
Yeah, so there's a couple takeaways from this section before we move to the next one. It's just this idea about everyone probably got KPI dashboards. I don't think we're doing anything innovative there, but I think the amount of interactivity we've tried to inject into it is something we feel really good about, and that was one of the things we wanted to highlight today. And that really enables data discovery. So you don't have to have Tableau Desktop, you don't have to have desktop skills, but if you give people the ability to slice and dice in the viz, in a browser, they can do all kinds of cool stuff. As Brett said, build and curate a centralized data source. And so go the extra mile, certify it, make sure that everyone understands how to find that source of truth. And then this way you get more people hunting for data versus arguing about where data comes from in the first place. And then have separate projects for truth and play. So we got a nice sandbox. Anybody can do whatever they want there. There's no governance, there's no rules, but we have strict rules and governance on the project for truth. So now we'll talk a little bit operationally. So what do we do? How do we put all this stuff to work in terms of how we actually run our operations? And so go on. I got this one. So a key question is, well, how are we performing against goals? We've all got goals if we're running an operational team. So how are you performing against that? So as I said, we have this central dashboard with activity. The data is a system of record. All the goals are in there, and we use obviously the goal lines and colors to make that pretty easy to get a sense of that. But with the interactivity, you get to interrogate things. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, so say I'm an APAC leader. I'm going to come in and every time I open this viz, I'm probably going to come in and filter to my section of the business so that I can see how I'm doing. But one of the really simple things that you may not be doing now that will make your life easier is set up a custom view. It's highlighted up. The button to do this is highlighted up on the screen, but it's really simple. You just pick the filters you want and then go save this and make it your default. So every time you open that URL, you're going to be taken exactly to the relevant data that pertains to you.
And then subscriptions is another great one. And so for example, if you're going to have a meeting once a week and look at a bunch of data, use a subscription to get everybody to have the same snapshot of the data at a point in time. Otherwise, if people pull data at different points of time, it doesn't match up. You have discussions around, well, my number doesn't match yours. When did you pull this? Oh, yesterday. Well, I pulled mine this morning. So a subscription is a powerful way to have the same data set pushed to a bunch of people so everyone is looking at the same numbers whenever you need that meeting to happen.
And then finally, in the same toolbar, you can also set up data-driven alerts. So if I'm really, really interested to see every single miss against my metric, I can set up an alert to get an email sent to me before maybe Ben sees it, and so that I can have an opportunity to improve it or figure out why. And that's just another really, really simple thing. You do have to have an axis in the view, so I've highlighted that in the viz here, but that's the only caveat there.
So how about speed? So how fast are we responding? So we'll share a little bit about this, but first, go ahead. This is the question of, well, how do you measure response time? And so you could use the median, which is the middle point there. You could use the average, but the median is really only half the tickets. So what about the other half? The average, well, what about distribution? Looking at all these tickets and things always get lost in amongst averages. And so what we've done is we look at this approach about percentiles. And so we call it TP, which is top percentile. And I don't think we're the only ones. We're not necessarily innovating here, but I just want to share our approach. And so the question is, if we look at let's say a TP 25, so what is the time for our fastest 25% of tickets, and 50 and 75 and 90 and so on. Go ahead. 50% would be median. You could look at the median response time and you'd be okay doing that. We're not here to tell you what's right or wrong or good or bad. We actually at Tableau go with TP90. So we look at the 90% fastest ticket, and that's where we set our goals. Our goal is to attain our goal is to hit our goals for 90% of our tickets. And so it's a little bit of a drive for excellence, with understanding that 10% we don't, there's opportunities to go dig in and improve there. So all the goals and all of our sheets are wired to this idea of TP90. You might be saying, wow, that sounds like kind of neat, but how do you do TP90? How do you do TP75 or whatever you want to do in your own operation?
Yes, this is an extremely easy thing to do in Tableau. You can either do it with a calculated field. I've shown those on the slide. The percentile is just an aggregate calculation. It's not actually supported on all databases in a live connection, but it is supported with extracts. So if you find that it's grayed out, just take an extract and you'll be able to do it. And then secondly, you can also just right-click on the pill you're using, and most of the common percentiles are actually already available to you from Tableau. So I've highlighted on this one how easy it is to get a TP90 or 90th percentile. And then so when you add all this up, instead of looking at a bar that shows you how your median or your average is over time, you can actually look at the whole distribution. So our goal line is highlighted in green, and you can see that our 25th percentile is almost invisible. You can hardly see it at the very bottom. We're doing an extremely good job against the fastest 25% of tickets. And then when you look at your median, your TP50, you can see that you've been meeting your goals for 2 years straight. Again, this is fake data, but this is to illustrate a point. And then where this gets more important is when you start to look at that latter half that doesn't get caught in the median. You can see that a couple times during last year, we were actually past goal, and we might not have known that if all we were doing is monitoring the median. And then when you look at the 90th percentile, you can see that there's maybe a lot of differentiation between the 50th, 60th, 70th, 50th, or 80th, 90th percentile. And so this is what it might look like when we monitor it. We set goals on that 90th percentile, so those circles are just meant to highlight where you make or miss. But having that extra context all in the same viz allows you to see the whole picture over time. So another question that comes up all the time is, where are we spending the ticket time? And oftentimes this discussion, in my experience, has led right back to the technicians. Well, what are they doing? And this can get kind of out of control. Like, what are we going to measure? Are you going to measure how long they're logged into a given web page? Are you going to track how long they've been sitting in their seat with some kind of pressure sensor? Are you going to watch where their eyes have been and how long they've been on a monitor? This can be a really costly question to answer precisely, both with money and with morale. It's kind of creepy when you start to do this, and people don't necessarily like it. So it can be culturally costly as well. And so what we did is we just took inventory of what kind of data we had, and we just took our basic history data for our tickets and then flattened it all out into a table that had a row for representing every change on a case. And I'm not going to go into how to do this necessarily right now. You can look at it afterwards or take it to your data people. But this is really crucial. Getting that data in that shape is really crucial to do the rest of what we're about to talk about. And so what does that allow us to do? What can we calculate? Well, right away, just even with this raw table, we can tell that there was a priority change on this case. It came in as a priority 2, and we actually increased it. So that might be a place to go back and figure out why your case ingestion system didn't appropriately get the priority at the beginning. We can also tell that because this case was unassigned, we can tell that it spent 5 minutes in the queue. We can tell that it spent 4 minutes on a technician, and it took 6 minutes to actually get to in work on the technician. And Tableau makes this really, really easy once you've got the data set up to create just a nice little case timeline. So this is the same data we were just looking at. And I'm going to show you what that looks like on a real case for us. And right away, I haven't even shown any numbers here, but you can get tons of insights and tons of potential avenues for improvement just by looking at this kind of viz. So we can see that this case spent about a fourth or a fifth of its time waiting in queue. We can see that something happened late in the case with the technician. Maybe they were blocked. There's an opportunity as a manager to go figure out what took so long on that pass. We can see that we had to ask a customer 4 separate times for things. So that's something to follow up on as well. It went to the development team, so it already gives you some context into what type of case this might be. And then you can also tell that it was prematurely closed. So all immediately obvious just from looking at the viz. And then once you start to aggregate these things up, just by stacking them in a stacked bar chart, you'll be able to visualize patterns in your oldest cases. This is just the oldest cases sorted from longest to shortest. And we've got it categorized into those same basic buckets: customer ask, development, in queue, and technician. And so one of the things that we sort of assumed for a while was that our oldest cases were probably mostly going to be concentrated in development. So when a case we had to go work with our development team, that might take longer. But when you actually highlight the amount of time spent, the portion of time spent by those cases in development, there is some, but it's not as consistent as we might have expected. There's actually a lot of room in here for improvement for us with our own technicians. So that's just one of the basic insights you can get from looking at this kind of analysis. Okay, and then so this is just a really simple resolution time over time viz, and we can see that we were going up. We can see that it was getting worse, but we don't necessarily know why. And all you have to do once you've set your data up, like we said before, is drop on those same cohorts, and it becomes immediately obvious that it was mostly explained by your in-queue. So I can make explaining things to your superiors, or that maybe you did actually need more people, simpler, and they can even monitor it themselves. And then obviously you can add all these together on a dashboard and have this nice drill down flow where you look at the aggregate time chunks, bring them down into specific cases, and then analyze the timeline of the case and even jump into whatever ticketing system you use. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to measure operational scale. And this one's pretty simple. The reason we're going to talk about it is because it was a really powerful metric that took hold internally almost immediately. So it's basically just cases. In our case, we're doing cases per registration, which is a kind of proxy for usage. So basically for 6 releases, we saw that the rate of cases per customer on installs or installations of Tableau Server was pretty flat. So we had about the same number of cases coming in for every 100 registered users. And then we launched 2019-2 and saw a 4 times increase in this metric. And so that was a really, really powerful viz to go and take to our development team and immediately be able to demonstrate the cost that change had. And what was even better was that because we had this in a nice, easily consumable viz, is that they were able to take that, turn it into a metric, meet weekly even with the support team, and then work to drive it down. And what I think is great about this is that in a spike like that, what might normally happen is that your development team fixes some of the immediate stuff. You can see that there's a big fall off early on, but without this actual metric, they might have assumed that things were good. So this is it's kind of a simple thing. It's just dividing your cases, your tickets, divided by whatever your cost driver is. For us, we're talking about users, but it can really, really take hold and turn into good things for you and the other departments that you work with. So the takeaways here: use custom server views. A lot of people don't use these, and they're really, really nice quality of life improvements. Use subscriptions. And use data-driven alerts to monitor your performance against goals. It can keep it more ubiquitous, to steal from Adam. Use percentiles to measure distributions. I didn't do it in that viz before, but you could even drop whatever aggregation you wanted on that stacked area chart. You could drop an average on it and see what that looks like too in context. It's just a really good way to track the whole movement and the whole distribution. And then create a data set that allows you to analyze case time at that granular level that we showed earlier. And also create smart transaction rate metrics to monitor how well you're scaling against your growing user base or your growing whatever it is that's your cost generator.
Yeah, and then just to wrap it up, just a couple things that we shared. This is the power of self-service, and so we really are trying to live that and empower our team to have as much data and as much access as possible. And then there's some ways we use it to run and manage operations. And so I think this case data one is a particularly fascinating one where you instead of looking at just numbers and aggregations, you actually take Tableau and point it at actual transactions and visualize it in ways that we hadn't before. And so it's definitely been a great way for us to move beyond just looking at our KPIs. Thank you. That's the thank you slide. Good.